Here we go. The first book I read this month was Modern Man in Search of a Soul by Carl Jung. I've been wanting to read Jung for months and months and months, and my cursory Google and Reddit searches sort of pointed me towards this one as a good place to start. He goes through a lot of his dream analysis in the beginning essays. This is a collection of essays, including his dream analysis, his thoughts on the idea of types. There's a really, really good essay in here called The Archaic Man. You can see The Archaic Man. He goes through the differences between himself and Freud. I really enjoyed essay number 10, The Spiritual Problem of Modern Man, and number 7, The Archaic Man. Jung's thought is really captivating for me. I really like how he insists upon the spiritual as being sort of a foundation for modern thought, or as it should be a foundation of modern thought if we're meant to sort of pop the bubble of modernity that sort of surrounds us. He really digs the spiritual for that. I really like his notion of breaking down personality types, of course, into introvert and extrovert, but then he goes through the 4 functions. What are they? There's thinking and sensation and intuition and feeling. And the distinctions between these 4 also are distinctive within introverted and extroverted. And all of these things together, it gave me a very clear understanding of the way personally I perceive things. I don't know. I've never felt like I belonged to a school of thought. I've never really pursued anything like that seriously, but I like Jung a lot. I've since bought a couple of his books. I'll read a few more this year. Who knows? Maybe in 6 months I'll be introducing myself as a Jungian to anybody who might be interested. But I can recommend this one as a good place to start. Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Really great start to the month. The second book I read was The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. I started this book almost 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago. I was in the middle of reading it, and myself as a reader, the only thing that really breaks my stride as a reader is like if life gets in the way in a very unavoidable way, like moving to a new house or travel or anything like that requires time that it just breaks my routine. And so that's what happened when I was reading The Savage Detectives the first time. I thought it would be a good idea to read when I was driving across the country, and the logistics of that just made the reading experience really tough. I also want to blame it on the edition I had. I had the Picador 40th anniversary edition. This really cool cover with, black cover with glossy illustration of a car. But I have a real tactile relationship with my books, and that book, and in general I think they're British paperbacks. They're kind of stiff and tough, and they don't sort of flop around. I really like these floppy books where you can sort of open them and lay them down, and you're not worried about creasing the spine. So I picked this one up again. It was kind of a buddy read with a friend of mine in the States, and I was really happy to get through it. Bolaño is excellent. I think this is my fourth or fifth of his, and increasingly I'm realizing that he is all of his work is really, it just makes up this greater idea. And the Savage Detectives is maybe, if 2666 is kind of the ultimate manifestation of this work, the Savage Detectives is maybe like the it's like the primary resource. It's sort of all of the ideas are in here. I've read Distant Star and By Night in Chile as well. It's all in here. And Bolaño's world and his voice I find incredibly hypnotizing. This book is not, this world is not entirely pleasant, right? Everyone's kind of dirty and smelly and no one ever has any money, right? But at the same time, it's super romantic. I would live in this book, and reading this book, I would live myself as reading this book forever, as well with 2666. I think 2666 is still my favorite Bolaño book, but something about the way he writes is so addicting. And I got lucky recently. They had the annual foreign book sale at the bookstore in Osaka, and I picked up 3 more Bolaño books for maybe like total 2,000 yen. So these days, what's that? $14. Yeah, so that'll be a project later this year. I'll read more Bolaño. I love Savage Detectives. I love this book. One of my favorites. Yeah, that's it. The next book I read was Under the Sign of the Labyrinth by Christina Tudor-Sideri, who is a Romanian-born translator and writer, who is affiliated with the Sublunary Editions, or I shouldn't say affiliated, but they put out most of her stuff. This is the first thing I've read of hers, and the first thing I've read from Sublunary. And I burged through this book in like a day, and every page felt packed with wisdom. She writes about memory and the way things change around us. Her memory, her sort of sense, her aesthetic sense of the world, I envy. I wish I sort of had that same connection or way of expressing the connection I have with the world. I put this book in my head, sort of next to Annie Dillard's Wholly the Firm. It's this exploration of life that's brief and powerful and mysterious. Tudor-Sideri tends to go more for the witchy side of things. There are some spells and hexes that she repeats throughout the book, whereas Dillard is more sort of traditionally Christian, spiritual, which I dig as well. This book it's hard to express exactly what it's about, but the way it makes me feel is like, it's exactly like, there's that band named The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die. I don't know anything about their music. I've never listened to it, but that sentence is sort of the it sums up the feeling I have reading this book, and I feel many times as a reader that's all it's about. like, you know, and Jung goes into this as well, this conquering of death, right? And this fear. We shouldn't have to fear it, and the roots of our civilization and the roots of our ancestors. This book sort of uses that as a linchpin to sort of hold on to, and feel that this place is better off than it seems. I hope that makes sense. I love this book. I bought a bunch more books from Sublunary, and actually here a bunch of ones that she translated, and I managed to get this one as well. If I had not seen Their Sleeping Faces, I'll read this one soon. These first 3 books of this month, heavy hitters, all of them, all favorites of mine. So that feels pretty good. Under the Sign of the Labyrinth. There you go, Sublunary editions. Next, I read Palafox by Eric Chevillard. Put out by Archipelago. Of course, these books are beautiful, and this one's got this real long format, which, I went for it. I've got another one of his books from Archipelago, and it's big and wide and square. It's like perfectly square. So maybe they were letting him work with the designers a bit. I don't know, but I think it was also put out relatively early in Archipelago's existence. Anyway, this book is about a mysterious creature. It's an animal, but it's kind of every animal. It's small and it's large. It has feathers. It has scales. It has teeth, and it has a beak. And it has been captured and is sort of changing hands and being studied by scientists and being put on display in a freak show or a circus, and it's being analyzed, and the voice of the writer is sort of a detached third person sort of narrating this series of events, and it's a little bit dry. Certainly it's social satire of the way we sort of feel as humans, that we have the right to understand everything as deeply as possible, regardless of whether it has a negative impact on whatever we're studying. This book is funny, not like haha funny, but like, oh yeah, that's funny. It was okay. I think I could have done a little more research before reading this book about what kind of guy Eric Chevillard is. He's a French writer, and this is published in 1990, and so it's got that kind of late 80s, early 90s weirdness to it. End of the 20th century, everything is weird. If anyone knows that aesthetic, right? Like, I'm looking at my shelf and I see like Mark Lehner at Two Babe, that kind of thing. It certainly fits in that, and it's a beautiful book, but didn't totally do it for me. I also really like this. This book has the tiniest little barcode. It's so teeny. But that's it. That's Palafox by Eric Chevillard. After that, I read Time of the Magicians by Wolfram Eilenberger. This book's been getting a little buzz. I've seen some other people online talking about it. It's a decade-long look at 4 philosophers, Wittgenstein, Walter Benjamin, Ernst Cassirer and Martin Heidegger, all German, all it's from like 1919 to 1929, and in this decade it sort of condenses all of their findings into this explosive moment in 1929, when Cassirer and Heidegger had a big debate. There they are, there's Cassirer and Heidegger. And I think that using that debate or conversation as a focal point is really useful and grounding. But, the whole time, that's sort of the introductory scene of the book. He sort of establishes this debate and then goes backward and builds up again to that point. But it sort of inherently, it puts Benjamin and Wittgenstein sort of aside. And because of that, I think this writer does a little more legwork, making Wittgenstein and Benjamin seem sympathetic or interesting, idiosyncratic characters. Certainly, I feel that this writer had more interesting things to say about Walter Benjamin's life and Wittgenstein's life, and more interesting things to say about Cassirer and Heidegger as philosophers, aside from Heidegger's sort of tryst or romance with Hannah Arendt. I think of these four, I mean, Benjamin's probably my favorite. I'm the most interested in his stuff. And Cassirer is sort of seen or painted as a kind of dry establishment philosopher, which, you can tell from this picture, he's certainly older than the others. I think it's fair to say that Wittgenstein is sort of isolated from the rest. His philosophy is so unique, right? Benjamin, his philosophy went on to establish the Frankfurt School, and that comes much later than this book sort of lets it go. So that's sort of my general impressions. I really enjoyed the Cassirer section. Again, talking about my guy, A.B. Warburg. Warburg is so interesting, and Cassirer's going to his library and the way it's organized as this sort of connection of symbols, the symbolic form as the key point of reference between two texts. That part was illuminating for me. I think Warburg's so interesting. And again, I got really lucky at a book fair in Osaka, and I got a book on Warburg that, maybe I'll make a little video talking about the books I've got at the book fairs out here recently, but finding good stuff is rare. And so whenever I do, I feel like it's this big synchronicity, going back to Jung, talking about synchronicities, right? That seems cool. This book is smart. It's not too difficult to read if you're sort of interested in getting into this period of philosophy. It's not difficult. There's some dense sections about Heidegger and Dasein and things like that, but in general, it's I would say it's like 60% biography, and maybe 40% philosophy. I recommend it. I think this is a really good book, and I'd like to read his other book about it's about four women, Hannah Arendt and maybe Ayn Rand and Simone Weil and one more. It's called The Visionaries, I think. That seems interesting as well. Kind of the same idea. Following that, I read Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. I've been working on a project of reading all of McCarthy's books leading up to The Passenger and Stella Maris, which I've got that box set back in the States. I've read a couple of his books, through the years, in college and in the years since. But last year I was like, I want to reread or read for the first time everything from the beginning. So I started with The Orchard Keeper and Outer Dark last year, which were both very good. Outer Dark especially left an impression on me. And Child of God is also excellent, left a big impression. Obviously, if you've read this book, you know it's difficult to forget what goes on in here. I was a little bit frightened at, like, people I watch on YouTube or people who talk about books. They make this book seem quite dark. And it is, but McCarthy is not like interested in shocking or scaring anybody, I don't think. He he's not out, he doesn't get a thrill for making you uncomfortable. So just because there are very, very debauched and devious acts of sexual, it gets pretty dark, but still the reading experience was enjoyable. And you can feel McCarthy sort of growing as a writer in this book too. This is the shortest one of his. It might be his shortest book, but it feels like every page is perfectly packed. Every word and every sentence does a really good job of conveying mood and tone. And I would say, if you haven't read any McCarthy, maybe not the best place to start. But if you're interested in his early books, this might be the best one, or certainly it's the quickest read. But Child of God is quite good from McCarthy, and I have Suttree on my shelf. I will be reading that hopefully later this year. I've got big reading plans as always, so we'll see what happens. He's Child of God. Following that, I read The City and the Mountains by, and forgive my Portuguese pronunciation, Essa de Quierós, I think. Essa de Quierós. Which, until I read this book, I didn't realize this is not a full name. This is a last name like Stendhal, or a single name like Prince. His full name is much longer. So I had to move this one on my bookshelves into the E's instead of the Q's. He was a Portuguese writer in the late 19th century and early 20th century. I think actually he might have died in the year 1900. The blurbs on here call him Portugal's Flaubert, and Harold Bloom calls him a writer of genius. This book is about a Portuguese aristocrat man whose family, generations past, moved to France, leaving their mountainside estate behind. And this boy makes a life for himself growing up in Paris, and he becomes sort of a figure in the social scene. There are some really beautiful descriptions of a lot of these 19th century gizmos and technology, like really gaudy technology for the sake of it, like dumb waiters, and there's all these super decadent parties that are often very funny. The book is narrated by the aristocrat's friend, who is similarly is a Portuguese man in Paris. And as they grow up, this friend has to go back to Portugal, to the country for various reasons. And when he visits his friend again in Paris, like the overwhelming, the pressure of all of this technology and all of these social obligations has worn him down and aged him a bit. And eventually they get news that there's a problem at his estate, and they have to go back to the countryside in Portugal, and he's a brand new man. and they eventually find, life there to be more fulfilling than in Paris. All of that's sort of given to you on the back. The main interest for this book is the writing. Eilenberger de Quierós is a good writer in this 19th century style. I see the similarities to a Flaubert. The writing is very funny. I really love that period of time that in Paris, late 19th century sort of symbolist movement. There's a lot of parody of all of these different thoughts and ideologies that sort of get recycled back and forth. There's a new one every week, right? And they all, part of being in that social circle is you have to follow all of them. And there's a really funny scene of a dinner party which goes wrong. That decadence is it's an aesthetic I enjoy, and I enjoy living in that. So this was a pleasant surprise. I had heard of this writer because of his book The Mayas, which is a huge 600-page book. Maybe Portugal's Ulysses or something like that. And I have that one as well in the States, but I managed to get this one at my favorite bookstore in Pittsburgh, Caliban Bookshop. And it was like $4. I was so happy to find this one. Translated by Margaret Jules Costa, who also translated my Pessoa. And I think she might do Spanish language translations for New Directions as well. She's quite good. So yeah, I really like this book. Obviously the plot is kind of predictable, but the writing and the tone are really pleasant. The characters are memorable. They're kind of like a Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, right? Where Sancho is the narrator, and Quixote is using dumbwaiters and things like that. Yeah, quite good. The City and the Mountains. I read The Premonition by Banana Yoshimoto. Yoshimoto is one of my favorite writers in general. The tone of her books, it gives me a good feeling. And for all the books I have or read or want to read that are these really dense literary explorations of life and death and whatever you will, these books are simple and they're magical for me. They're kind of literary junk food. They make me feel good, but they also give me enough literary sustenance to where I'm not feeling like I'm wasting my reading time. So I love Banana Yoshimoto. Last year I read Amrita, which is one of my favorite books, maybe ever. Maybe the best one of hers I've read. This one was newly translated, I think last year, by what's her name? Asa Yoneda. She translated Dead End Memories as well. I guess Yoshimoto's got a new translation deal with, this one's Faber and Faber, but the counterpart is it Counterpoint? They put out the American version. Anyway, this is the second year in a row there was a new Yoshimoto book translated into English, and I think there's a new one coming this year, 2024, as well. Before that, there was a bit of a dry spell. She's got dozens of books that haven't been translated, so I'm really excited to get to those. However, this one was pretty weak. I think this is from early on in her writing career. And so maybe at this point, I've read enough of her books and seen how she progresses as a writer to know that she gets better. This book is about a girl who has a premonition that her family is not her real family, and her real family is out there to be found. Her sort of aunt is her sister. And in very Yoshimoto fashion, it's very ambient and it moves kind of dreamlike. The pace is very calm. The writing is direct and frank, but also a little bit fantastical, if you will. But there's spoilers, I guess. It's kind of thank God my family's not my family. Now I can date my brother. Bit weird for me. Like, especially because it's so short and brief. They don't really it's so short, so the transition from we're family, we're not family, we're gonna date, it just happens fast, and it feels like that was the conceit that she wanted to write about, this sort of relationship between a sibling relationship that turns out to have no blood relation, and so they can pursue their feelings without any guilt or shame. Which, sure, that's an interesting idea, right? I've seen similar ideas, right? I've read. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Robert Musil. It feels brief. It feels like brief, and that was the point she wanted to get to, or that was the idea she wanted to explore. But the book's 130 pages. Yeah, definitely maybe her weakest one that I've read. But I love her. I love Yoshimoto. And I'll read everything she's got. I've got NP here I'm going to get to soon as well. Next I read The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie, who's in the news for his new memoir about his the assault he dealt with a couple years ago. He's since lost an eye and was stabbed dozens of times and thankfully survived. And this book is kind of the reason why he was attacked, right? The book deals with it's a retelling of the story of Muhammad receiving sort of apocryphal texts, and this sort of they put the fatwa on him, and they so it goes so far against the religion that he needs to be killed for it. That's sort of the reason this book is famous beyond literature. But the book itself is really, really good. I feel, unfortunately, ill-equipped to read this book. I'm not well educated in Islam. I'm not well educated in Indian culture. I would like to correct that, and I think this book gave me an appreciation for that style. When I was in high school, we had to read Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which I enjoyed. We had to read The Interpreter of Maladies, which was fine. And we had to read Fasting and Feasting by Anita Desai, and I hated that book. I hated that book so much. I can't remember why, but I just know I hated it. And ever since then, it's been like a bit of a mental thing for me that I'm not interested in Indian literature. So I'm trying to work through that and be open-minded. and Salman Rushdie. This book has been on my shelf for years. I think I got this book in there in March 2017 is when I bought this book. The writing is on a sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter basis. It's artful. The prose is very beautiful. Each sentence is sort of a little mini masterpiece, the way he writes it. I really like the two main characters, Gabriel and what's his name? Chamcha. Gabriel is the Saladin Chamcha. Gabriel as the sort of fallen angel, and Saladin as the devil incarnate. It's epic. It's really epic in scale, and from what I gather about Indian culture, that is appropriate. It is meant to be epic and huge. The pace of the book, everything is constantly, well, it's sort of in two parts. There are these chapters that take place in the present, in which Gabriel and Saladin are embodying the Archangel Gabriel and the devil, and in London, and we exploring their past as well, and this sort of rising apocalypse, where everything is frenetic and chaotic, and it doesn't seem to stop. It's very exhausting to read because of how fast everything goes. It reminded me of similarly apocalyptic visions, maybe like Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed, or Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, or maybe the end of Little Big as well. It never stops, and it's about the Rushdie has said that it's primarily about the immigration experience, as an Indian in London, but also in general, the immigrant experience. And as a temporary or quote unquote immigrant, I mean, I don't know, I've been living abroad for 5 years. It opened my eyes to a lot of things, and it made me feel very lucky. But the confusion and the pace of things, I could understand. I could relate to that a little bit. But I think I've been so lucky in my experience, and perhaps I need to think more deeply about what the opportunities I've been given as a quote unquote immigrant here in Japan. Yeah, this book was really good. A little bit like these sort of dense, like 450 to 500 page novels where every word on every page is packed with meaning and beautiful writing. They tend to wear me down. So it's not like an all-time favorite, but I really liked it, and I want to read more Rushdie. So there's that, the Satanic Verses. The last book I read in April was Dukla by Adrzej Stasiuk, I think. Who's a Polish writer. This one's put out by Dalkey Archive, who I love. And this book intentionally and directly conveyed to the reader has no plot per se. Plot does not drive this book. There's not supposed to be any driving, powerful moments of character growth or anything. He says several times throughout the book, this is an attempt to write about light. And I love that idea. I love that so much. The structure it's kind of in 3 parts. There's a sort of essay portion at the beginning. There's a big novella, which is the sort of titular Dukla novella. And then there are maybe a dozen or 15 sort of sketches of little moments in life that seem the novella as well. They seem kind of autobiographical. The depictions of this town, Dukla is a small Polish town, very small. There's a church, and in the church, in the sort of catacombs, there's like a body of like some holy woman, and the writer sort of returns to that place and that moment throughout his life. And writing about light, I think he does a really good job of writing about light. I think that in many ways, this book is a huge success. It was, many parts were very moving for me. I think this idea of light, in a way, light is sort of, and in the book he talks about it as well, that without light, we're not going to be able to see anything at all, of course, right? And so paying attention to light and the absence of light and shadows and the sort of separation between light and darkness and how that changes, that being something worth writing a 200-page novel about. I dig that a lot. I really loved this book. I'd like to read more by this writer, but I don't know how much is translated into English. Maybe 3 or 4 more books. And this is the kind of thing I aspire to. I think it's fair to say that, siren's going off. I think it's fair to say that every serious reader, somewhere in their consciousness is also toying with the idea of being a writer, whether or not they pursue that actively or consider it seriously. I myself do not consider that stuff so seriously. Writing seems kind of tough, but I would aspire to write something like this. I think capturing light is worth pursuing, and this book made me feel really good. That's Dukla by Adrzej Stasiuk. And there you have it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books again in April 2024.